Last time I did a fancy PowerPoint, but I'm just doing a handout tonight, so. And I thought, do I not do a handout? But I was like, well, it's good sometimes to follow along. So this in the Caring Congregation book was chapter 6, I believe. And a lot of what, this is one-on-one visits. We're talking about one-on-one visits tonight. So some of it I pulled from the book. Now, probably most of you could actually get up here and do this because you may have had more experience than I with one-on-one visits. I'm sure, Gina, you have. But I think we'll share a lot of experiences tonight. So I feel like I'm facilitating this session. So feel free to chime in whenever you like. But one of the things, and I don't want to keep repeating this, but I just put on here, again, sort of what is the role of the CCMs, because a lot of times congregants are like, CCMs, were they? I didn't know. And it's also so you can help explain what is a CCM. And so we have, a lot of times people, if they have an issue, they think, oh, the pastors. And it used to be that way when we were a small church, but the church has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And even restoration, Tim can't, tend to everyone. So we look at the congregational care ministers as an extension of the pastoral staff to tend and care for the congregation. And when I was hired, Barbara said, the one thing that I'm concerned about is I don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. So that's what I look as part of the CCMs, is to help that no one falls through the cracks. Now, certainly there's people, they don't want us to know about their situations, and so that's fine. We don't need to be like, if you heard through the grapevine someone's, having surgery or whatnot, you're welcome to follow up. But sometimes people don't want to know, and if they don't want to know, that's okay. But it's the people that want to be known that they're having something going on in their life. That's who we sort of want to keep up with. So I had someone come to me the other day. So and so. They had a cancer treatment at the end of last year, and they were just in the hospital for 6 days, but she doesn't want anyone to know. I was like, what would you like me to do? Nothing. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me know. Okay. But I think that's good that we know. So if we see that person in church, then we can just be cognizant, and we may not bring it up, but just be, hey, how are you doing type thing. So there's all those sorts of things out there. But and I was talking to someone about this. I think it was Diane, CCMing, it's almost a condition of the heart. And when I look at, say a dad, like, I want my son to be a great pitcher, and I'm going to get them a pitching coach, and they're going to do explosive performance, and they're going to lift weights, and they're going to practice every day. Will that kid be a good pitcher? That stuff's going to help, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a good pitcher. And I look at that with CCMs, it's that, there's certain characteristics that make a good CCM. And that we could go over some of those. But, so I think training and getting out and doing the work with CCM is really helpful, but you still have to have those certain characteristics. So I know we're not to one-on-one visits yet, but so what might be some of the good characteristics of a CCM?
I think what we talked about last week, being a listener.
Yeah. And I know some of this is a little bit list. Again, what Kelly had talked about, it's sort of, you use that in your visits, so I am sort of being repetitive, but I think that's okay. So you want to be a good listener. That's one of the ones I had. I should say.
You need to be compassionate.
Yes. Compassionate. So that you, like, frequently when I'm going to see someone, I'm thinking like, oh, I try to put myself in their shoes, and I think that helps with, the compassionate part. It's like, how would I, what are they thinking? This is their family situation, or it's not like, oh, if, it wouldn't be like if I had that happen to me, it's like them having that happen to them. So what are they feeling? Any other thoughts?
Empathetic and sympathetic.
Yeah. Empathetic, I do an and. So empathetic and yeah, really, they're hurting, and you feel they're hurt. You hurt because they hurt.
To be some amount of commitment.
Yes, thank you. Right, because we can be, a good listener, compassionate, empathetic, and you really want to be a CCM, but you don't have time for it. And that's not a bad thing unless you say, yes, I want to do this. But, it's realizing that and being able to make the time.
I think you should be patient.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Patient is great. So anyway, I went to see Carlene. I felt kind of bad because I knew I only had so much time there. And you hate to visit someone and be like, I gotta go. But when I got there, I did sort of say at the front, I'm going out later this evening and I have to leave at this time. I'm sorry to, so you have to explain that. But
We stayed for 2 hours.
yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it was sort of just one of those, like, oh, my husband, I didn't want to be late there. But yeah, to not be rushed, to be patient. And sometimes people, it takes them a while also to come around to what they can't. Some people, you can walk in and they're going to go blah, 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 blah. But other people, you have to earn their trust. So you have to be really patient. I know when CCM's like, I don't feel like we're getting anywhere. And she met with her girl, and she's like, she still wants to meet because it's helping her. But even though the CCM didn't feel like it was helping, at least the one receiving care felt that it was helping. So sometimes it takes a while for them to get comfortable and be able to say things.
I think because we're an extension of the church, we have to have faith and good theology. Because we have to be able to pray.
Yeah.
And so we have to be people of faith, and I always feel like it's good to know your Bible.
Right, it is good because it comes in handy. Knowing certain verses that are applicable to a person's situation. And that's one of the things where we said, the requirement to be in a Bible study, to have Disciple 1. So that if we were social workers, maybe that wouldn't be important. But since we're representing the church and our extension of the pastoral staff, that's a very good point.
I would say you want the person to be reliable and also good follow-through.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're assigned a project or a task.
And trustworthy, I would tag on to that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that goes with commitment as well.
Right, yeah, yeah, and that's really important, being reliable. And I know I've said this before, if I say to someone, here's an opportunity, and I would much rather someone say, I would be really interested in that, but I just can't do that at this time, versus someone saying, yes, I'll do that, and then make the introduction, maybe have a meeting, and then not follow through, because it can be a difficult situation. We had one where the woman didn't really want a CCM. Her daughter wanted her out of a CCM, and we got it all worked out, and then CCM really didn't have time. And so it's sort of awkward because, like, how do we work another one in there? And,
And also, if you talk to the person and say, I'll come over Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and then you call it 3:30. Now, you can have emergencies, but
Right,
some people just
right.
don't have priorities.
Right. Yeah, it's like
I got an offer to go to the movies, so.
Right. Yeah, no, if you make a commitment, you have to stick with it. Yeah. And it is like when you put it on your calendar and it's there. But of course, you know, if something, your kid's sick or whatever, you're sick, then things change. But yeah, having that
And I
commitment.
think also you have to be able to sort of empty yourself before you go. And remember, it's not about you, you know, like leave your stuff in the car.
Right.
Go visit them.
Right.
And sometimes that's hard. I know Kelly talked about it the last time, that someone may say, oh, this and this happened to me, and only if it's appropriate, you can say, oh, I can appreciate or I can empathize with that more than sympathize, because I too lost a brother, or I too have lost my mother. Because a lot of people are grieving that we're gonna meet with, and you can say, you know, I empathize with you because I've had loss also. But it's not about your loss, it's about
Right.
their loss.
Right. And that's a great point. That's one of the things we get into. Having a similar situation in your own life can help you understand their situation better. But again, it's not about you. You don't want to walk in like, oh, I'm sorry your mom passed away. And my mom died last year too. And this is what I went through. And you're like, you know, it would be that your mom passed away may come up, it may not come up. And then it would be, you know, on a more subtle way. I feel your pain. I also lost my mother and I'm so sorry for you type thing. But backing up with the trustworthy, that's really important, which goes with the confidentiality. And that gets to, you know, getting them to trust you. And as time goes on, that trust builds. And certainly you don't want to be like, hey, come to church like, oh, I met with so-and-so and, you know, this and that happens, which I think we all know. But again, you know, I think these are sort of important to talk about frequently because it's a good reminder of some of the really important characteristics to keep in mind when we're meeting with individuals. So, any others? So, all right. And one-on-one visits. So getting to that. So they can really be anywhere. We talk about hospital visits. So one-on-one, it could be that you're going to the hospital, or it could be you're comforting somebody in their house, or it could be if someone's dying, they may be in a hospice center. Somebody, if they're meeting a CCM, may not feel comfortable meeting in their house. It may make more sense to meet at Starbucks or some neutral site like that. So there's all sorts of different places. But why? Why are we doing one-on-one visits? Why are we meeting with these other people? Any thoughts?
Why are we, I mean, is it, we're there to listen, we're there to understand their situation, what they're going through, and be an ear.
Mm-hmm. But I like how you said understand what they're going through, listen. So that's great. We're there to understand what they're going through.
I mean, we're not there to fix the problem,
No.
we're there to understand and just basically listen. There could be a slight guiding, but I don't know, it depends what the situation is.
Right. And, yeah.
I think we provide support too, without judgment.
Yeah, and that was a good, that's another thing I wanted up here, is non-judgmental. Non-judgmental. Right. Because sometimes CCMs may be, oh, I can tell this to you, I can tell you this, but I can't tell my family. And for various reasons, because, I had one earlier this year say that, and it's just maybe the relationship with the daughters was not that, or they don't want to burden their family members. And I don't know if you've ever felt that way, like, oh, I could talk to other people about this, but not my family sometimes. So, and one of the things, when Gina, you brought up faith and good theology, is we hope that these people can feel the love of God and are comforted by that, and hopefully we can facilitate in that. as well. And at one time, it must have been a Bible study or something, it talked about, you're Christ's ambassador. Can you imagine, like you're actually, that's your official title. You're like, if you were the ambassador to Japan, you are representing the U.S. and you don't want to, you want to do everything perfectly. And I'm not saying that we have to do everything perfectly, but it's like, oh, I'm representing Christ, so I want to, keep that in mind and, behave accordingly. So.
You say, why do we do them if it's, one-on-one visits? I mean, I'm a big believer that you can also get more out of a one-to-one conversation because you can look at them, you can have read their body language, you can, versus a telephone, or at least I come from corporate America, the problem with telephone calls or conference calls is everybody's really back there doing their emails, and it's like, so you can have a quality conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as certain people, CCMing, they certainly do the one-on-one visit, and sometimes that you do that conversation over the phone or even texting nowadays, and there is nothing like that one-on-one visit. But also you're showing a commitment. Linda, how are you? You're showing that commitment that you're willing to make the time
Right.
to be with these people. And that goes a long way. Like, oh, I don't have time to meet with you. I have time to talk on the phone. But sometimes they prefer talking on the phone, and that's not a bad thing. But it is funny because you do need to focus when you're on the phone. And sometimes in today's society, we're like, oh, let me type this up, or, so you have to pay attention on there.
And the initial contact may be by phone, too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
make the
Yeah.
first, so it's okay to do that.
Yeah, it's certainly okay, and your care receiver may say, like, I really don't have time to meet in person that often, but if I can call you, that would be great. And they just may need encouragement, or a lot of times people just want to talk about their situation, and they talk through it as you listen, so they're just talking through it. And what these visits, they give us an opportunity to develop a rapport with our CCM, so then they start to trust us and over time and have that source. So one of the things I was going to ask, if we could go around the room and everyone if you think of a one-on-one visit that you've had with somebody, that was a good one-on-one visit, if you want to talk about that or explain that. Anyone? I can start.
Well, I haven't done a CCM visit since you haven't let me loose yet, but I have a good friend of mine who's I play in a music group with, and he's 72 years old, and he's had brain cancer. Mm-hmm. So I spent some time with him, and it's just being with him and listening to him and talking to him, and we had a great conversation. Not only did he tell me really what he went through medically, but I learned a lot about his life of being a salesperson for selling helicopters and commercial airliners, right? Commercial airplanes to airliners. And it was fascinating. So I spent 2 hours with him, and it was just being an outlet for him to talk. And it's interesting, he's the one that said that he's had a number of people call him and say, oh, I want to come over and visit you, and at the last moment they cancel, and he said that just drives him nuts.
Oh.
He gets all excited.
Oh.
So, thank goodness I was there on time.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of sad. Yeah. I knew that. But it is true. It's funny, these people you meet with, and you find it like, wow, they're really interesting. And, yeah.
No, I've known this person for 3 years, playing in bands. I used to see him at least once a month, twice a month, and it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I learned a lot more about him.
Right. You're like, who knew? Yeah. Well, good. See, you're already doing CCM stuff. Yeah.
On my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't an official CCM, but I had the opportunity through WOW to take care of a couple of ladies who were going for cancer treatments, and one of them, she was one of those bright shining lights And so it was very easy. And the other one was kind of hard because I always had to take a nap after I visited her, because there was always just kind of word vomited on me about all the problems that she was having with her family and that kind of thing. And that was really hard, but you know, there were times when she would ask me to do something for her and I'd just have to say, I just really can't, because of what was going on at the time in my own life. And I was like, I couldn't afford to have her bring me down. But the other person, you know, unfortunately she died last year, but she was easy. It's really great when you have the easy ones, but then you have those tough ones.
And see, you've already been doing CCM stuff too. But that, you bring up a good point. I mean, people in similar situations are, no two people are the same. And good for you for putting up boundaries. Like, can you do this? Can you do this? Because some people will be like, oh, my new best friend, and we can do everything together, and they can do everything with me. And that's not what you're there for. They have a situation, you're there to provide support to them. So it's okay to say, oh, I'm here to support you, and I that's not something I feel comfortable doing, that's not how I see this relationship going, and I'd love to, if you have a certain thing you'd like to talk about, or I can pray with you. But good for you for putting up your boundaries. So.
One of the things, I did pediatric social work when I first got out of college, and then later on I did risk management for a large inner city hospital in Oklahoma. And one of the things I learned, particularly in the second job, was that if you come in to a patient room or with someone with some confidence, but not as your swagger, but people need to know this is somebody who's strong, that I can dump on them, and they're going to be there's your own body language as well as theirs. And I remember a lady who said, I just knew when I heard your walk that I knew you were someone who could help me. And I thought, that's strange, but it also was that if you have some confidence about yourself when you go in, then people feel like, okay, here's a responsible person who I can talk to and can really take my situation to heart, to really listen. And I think that's an important thing to be, not afraid, but to know that you can do this.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes with,
Yes.
all that. Like, if someone's, to come see you in your situation, being their social worker, but it's having also that love for that person. Like, you're a loved person, and coming across part of the faith is a very strong part of that. If we're confident in our faith and God loves us, then it's easier for the one we're caring for to feel that as well. But that's true if someone says something and you're there to support them and you don't have confidence in your ability, that's going to be hard to support them.
If you react with disdain or
judgment
or shock of any kind,
and again, the patience, like, come on, spit it out, right. And so that's, all that, to be confident in your abilities to support them. Oh, that's very good. I like that. Anybody else want to chime in?
I've done this for a few years, and every situation is going to be different. I mean, you can be called to the hospital to visit someone, and they really are not interested in seeing you, which is okay. I mean, you've shown up, you've represented the church, so every time it's not going to be a home run.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can walk away thinking, that wasn't very successful. And then other times, you know, all you have to do is just sit and be there with someone, if it's right after surgery, or if nobody is visiting them, sometimes just coming and praying with them. Again, I think it depends on what the situation the person is in that makes the difference. And then when you have a long-term commitment with someone, there is that push and pull, like you're really getting to know them and you like them and you want to be their friend, but then you do have to pull back and say, well, this really isn't my role. Maybe after we finish this part of our relationship, then we can be friends. So I think we just have to be open, depending on what the situation. If it's someone in hospice and they're dying, sometimes just reading to them, holding their hand, even combing hair, putting lotion on their hands. I mean, just those kinds of touch things are okay. I really think it just depends, but we just remember that we are meeting Jesus there, that we are not bringing Jesus to them. He's already there. And I think it's just the willingness to be present. And sometimes it's hard when you really don't want to be there, especially if someone's really sick or if you know they're dying. And the other thing that I have a care receiver, and I'm concerned about her health right now, and I'll go and see her in person. But I'm worried, and I mean, I think you have to remember to make notes. And when you are finished with the training and you're on the portal, you need to document what you see and what you're doing, so that whoever is looking, especially Carol, will know where you are in the care. And the nice thing about being a congregational care minister versus a Stevens minister is that if you have someone and you're seeing them exclusively, but you get sick and they still need care, because we work as a team, that someone else can step into your place if it's okay with your care receiver, which is nice. So they have continuity of care, which is a good thing.
Right, and that is, thank you for bringing that up, because some people are better at entering their notes than others. But it does allow, like you said, if someone's sick and can't visit their person and you're filling in, then you can go through and see the notes. But backing up to what you said, you may go to the hospital and people may be like, I don't want to see you. What Barbara said, oh, yeah, that's part of being a minister. Every minister has been kicked out of the hospital, right? That's part of it. But
or you get there and they're, having a diaper change, or their bed's being done, or something, and you find you can't stay around while all of this is happening. You can leave a table tent to say I was there. You can call, or I'll come back and visit again. But every visit may not be successful. And success is, I guess, measured differently. I wouldn't consider, if someone's maybe like, no, I don't want you to visit right now, and, that's fine, and, it's that I can, just whatever, come back later if you like, or, okay, is it okay if I pray for you after I leave, that type of thing. But don't consider it as a failure, because you never know what impact it's going to have on somebody. Well, Carol and I just went through a situation with my care receiver now. I was visiting her in the hospital after an issue, and I didn't feel like I was making any impact, because she was so in this situation. And I said to Carol, I don't really think that she needs a CCM, and I don't think it's been impactful. And then you went and took her a meal, and she was saying glowing things about
She's
me.
like, oh, that Gina Hume is great. She's
And
so
then I
wonderful.
called her
She
up on
came
the
every
phone,
day.
And I called her up on the phone and I said, would you like to meet again? And she said, oh, that would be so great.
Yeah.
So sometimes we don't recognize that we are making an impact, and it's good to bounce it off with somebody else who can actually say yes or no.
I mean, she specifically mentioned how helpful you were, so clearly it's registered with her. So, yeah. And you don't know, even someone who may not be receptive, you never know. They might, a year later, turn up in church and, things change. So, okay. What do I visit? Oh. So a lot of this I did come from the book, but hospital visitation, just some things to remember when you're visiting somebody in the hospital. So they're in, typically, if their body has something wrong, it could be their mind, So the body's distressed, spiritual. So, say someone's had an accident and we're focused on, oh, they're injured, but it also, their spirit and their psychological well-being can be affected too, because you don't know, like, oh, well, who's going to take, someone could be in there and they're more worried about their children, or, who's now going to watch my mother, and, oh, or they could be worrying about work or things like that. So it's not just the specific issue that they're in there for, but there's a whole lot of things that can affect. And then sometimes also when the person's hurting, then their family and friends are hurting. A loved one has cancer, and that could be very traumatic for a spouse, the children, and all that. So does that care involve the family, or how do you involve the family? And sometimes it could be, well, there's a CCM for the husband, there's a CCM for the wife, and they just have different needs. Because if one is dying from cancer, that person may have different needs than the one who's losing the loved one to cancer. So that's things to consider, is just to be aware of. Not to say, well, it may be too much if you're caring for the entire family, but then that might be a situation where you say, like, hey, maybe we can have more people in there addressing the situation. So, and just keeping in mind the people they're at a very vulnerable time, and again, you might be seeing them in a situation they never expected to be in. Sometimes it may be difficult for them to have people see them in this situation. But again, on the contrary, they may be like, well, I'll talk to you about this, but I don't want to burden my family with this. And prayer, particularly for hospital visits, is very important. I know, particularly if I'm going to hospital or not, I will be praying, God, give me the right words. May I be a blessing and a help to this person. May you be with us while we're together. And mentally preparing myself, thinking, all right, I'm going to be in this situation. What would be the most helpful things to do or listen, or what type of listening? So to pray before, during, and a lot of times it's good to say, is it okay if I pray for you, or could I pray for you now, or do you mind if I hold your hands and pray? Some people would be totally weirded out with that, and other people would, that's the first thing they want you to do. So, and then after, praying for them after as well. And at the end of the visit, what type of follow-up? So it's, sometimes if someone's having outpatient surgery, they're going home, and you might want to say, oh, and you can follow back up with me like Gina did, like, oh, I don't really know if I should continue to visit with her or not. Or with that person, like, oh, do you mind if you're going to be home in 2 days? We're going to be home tomorrow. Would you like me to stop by tomorrow or the day after, or whatever, obviously with your schedule permits. But when you have a seat, don't leave your care recipient hanging. Have some type of follow-up if it's appropriate. But any other things to remember visiting people in the hospital?
Because it may just be a one-time. It may just be a one-time visit.
Yeah.
The pastors can't go, and we're an extension of the church. And we haven't been called very often to go in advance. I know Jeanette did a lot of this, going to the hospital to pray before they go into surgery. Or a lot of times it's after surgery, but sometimes it's before surgery. And then the pastors want to come, the doctors want to come in and be involved with the prayer, which is kind of interesting too. So be prepared. We'll be praying for everybody.
Yeah. And it's good to pray for the medical team as well. Yeah.
What do you do, as you were mentioning, if, because this is a different situation in social work, if someone says, well, I need this, 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 and this, but really that's not the total role of CCM,
Right.
to make sure the power's not turned off, or that, somebody's mailed their bills, or all those things.
Right.
Can we, do we contact family members? Should we let you know?
Well, that's Yeah, it depends what they're asking you to do. If they're asking something to do that you're not comfortable doing with, then clearly don't do it. It could be a situation where, say they're going home from the hospital and they're like, oh, I need to have all this stuff. That would be something where maybe then you could talk to the nurse and say, oh, well, let's talk to, and include them, like, let's talk to the nurse about that. I don't have any knowledge of how to get that stuff, but let's see what the nurse says. And maybe they can get connected with a resource. And you do want to be careful of the boundaries, because someone, like, can you do everything for me? Like, no, you need to solve your own problems, but you do want to provide maybe direction, or give options on how that can be accomplished if it's something that you can't do or you don't think is appropriate. So I had an elderly neighbor, and I visited her once a week, and we would do different things, and she'd be like, hey, can you take me here? And if I could, and I'd be like, sure. But that was just our relationship. I mean, she was a very interesting person, and if I'm like, no, I can't do that because I'm busy, or so it's sort of where you feel comfortable. And certain things we certainly don't want to do. If they're like, I'm coming home to the hospital and I need someone to stay with me because I might fall, then
Oh, we've had that.
then you need
Oh! So what did you do?
Or I need someone to pick up my drugs for me.
Oh, I've done that.
Yeah, don't do that.
And it was, and I thought, this is, it was a high-strung painkiller, and I thought, they are just not gonna let me walk
No.
away with this, and they didn't, of course. I don't know why the hospital didn't send away, but, yeah, we've had people who have come home from the hospital and have said, now what? I'm like, that's a conversation you should have had with people before him.
Yeah.
And we've had people from the church then step up and allow them to be in their home. And then those stays were overstayed, and anyway, it snowballs.
Right. And that's something to keep in mind. We can't do anything with medicine. We can't pick it up at the store or the pharmacy. We can't dispense it. So you really cannot do anything with medicine. And as far as them, oh, I need someone to help me, navigate around my house for the next 2 days, then, we have a list of care providers. Oh, well, here's, we have a couple people that have companies in the church that provide care providers, and
often hospitals will have care navigators
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
before someone's discharged,
Right.
to say, you need to make an appointment with a social worker, with a
Yeah.
physical therapist, and they give them a punch list of things they need to do.
Right.
Which is not your responsibility.
yeah.
And I mean, all we can say is, I'm here to lend you spiritual support. I'm not here to do these other things. Your family needs to help you.
Yeah.
Or like you say, the hospital can direct you, or,
To the resources.
Yep, direct you back to the social worker at the hospital.
Right,
Right.
right. And it does sometimes get sticky if the person's like, well, I don't have money for that. But again, that's, they have to solve their problems. So, yeah,
do people
no.
come to the pastors with those kinds of same requests? I mean, I can't imagine that they're saying to the pastors, oh, can you stay in the house with,
Right.
they're seeing us as something other than.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm just thinking one person who wanted some, like they needed to have like a care assistant, a CNA type assistant, certified nursing assistant, and we're concerned they didn't have money about that. And if you're that, if it gets into an acute situation, we do have discretionary funds, but it really depends on the situation. And they didn't feel that. We didn't get to that point with that person yet. And the person had family in the area, so.
I think Gina's point of we're there for spiritual support is really, for me, I have to tattoo that. Not physical, not, emotional, not counseling, not water bills and groceries and changing diapers. Yeah, I need to, and when I say we, I mean me, I have to narrow, because at one point I was like, oh, I'm just going to be the social worker that fixes all things. You're homeless? I'll fund you a house, no problem. You need
Yeah.
furniture?
program is an extension of Stephen's ministry. And Stephen's ministry was listening and walking side by side with someone. That's all it was. And this is sort of the same extension, except we do hospital visits and we do frail and dying visits and, you know, that kind of thing that Stephen's ministers don't do. I mean, we are an extension. But like you say, we are not social workers, and we are not an Uber, and we are not all things to all people.
And that you brought up a good point. If we're an extension of the pastoral staff, do you see Tom going and,
Right.
no, I'll stay at your house overnight? I mean, actually, he probably would, but no, you know, he doesn't.
Drug for you.
Yeah, he doesn't, you know, so that's something to think about.
But now, you all, in the big church, the mothership, you have your CMs, and then you do have people who work on meals, and you do have people who do Ubering. So, because the transportation one is one that is, so we as CCMs shouldn't not necessarily be doing transport.
I mean, what you all determine at Reston is what you all determine at Reston. This is the way it's been. It doesn't mean it has to be that way, but we do have a list of people who volunteer to give transportation, give rides to doctors, run errands, whatnot. And we have another list of people that have offered to do meals for people. So we don't therefore need the CCMs to do that.
Right.
Now, that said, I could put a ride request out and nobody will, of the 75 people on the list, nobody will sign up. So it's really, by no means should a CCM feel obligated to do that. Now, if they want to do that, it's like, oh, well, we can spend our hour chatting in the car, so sure. So it's more of a,
Okay.
I would say, you know, what they're...
Is there a concern of, I'm coming from my corporate America world, when I worked for Apple Computer, the issue was is if I was carrying around a client in my car, I had to make sure that the company, my insurance company, knew I was doing that, and the Apple Computer Act, the insurance policy that stated it.
Right.
Was part of it. I guess my question is that it's a liability issue.
But are we're not really well, we could be representing the church. And if you're a CCM, you are. If you're just a volunteer, you're not.
Not.
But you might, I mean, I know before we've had signups for meals, which is what we have. We have meal sign up, which is not a CCM responsibility. As a CCM, you can sign up
Right.
and say, oh, I'm meeting with, you know, Joe Blow on Wednesday.
Right.
I'll take that meal because I've already got a time set up. And we used to have rides for a gentleman who's passed away, and it was rides to cancer treatment.
Right.
And that sometimes would spin into stopping at the Giant because he lived alone and letting him pick up things that he had pre-ordered.
Or Walmart.
Or Walmart. But, you know, having sign-up geniuses for rides and for meals takes that out of the realm of the CCM.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have someone who can set up those things and find volunteers within restoration, which you have a lot more people now at the church, you may find that you can funnel those things off away from the spiritual care that the CCMs are driven to do.
No, and that, I agree wholeheartedly. And right now, actually, we have a beautiful, beautiful situation where Restoration and Floris are working together to help someone go 3 times a week to dialysis. And so it's really great because she does a small group on Monday nights here. And so her small group has stepped up, and then Restoration, and so it's gone out to all, you know, both congregations, and people are signing up to take her to and from dialysis. So and that's all they're doing. There's no other, it's just transportation.
And so, Woody, to get back to your question, I think how you avoid the, oh, are we an extension of the staff and we're giving rides, is if there's a sign-up genius and you volunteer through the sign-up genius as a ride volunteer, but you happen to be the CCM,
Right.
but you're working in your volunteer capacity, your transportation volunteer capacity versus your CCM capacity. So, yeah. I mean, it can develop in, if a friendship develops or a thing develops. I give a woman a ride to church frequently, and it's sort of, is that a CCM capacity or it's,
I think it's just when it snowballs out of control.
yeah.
If it becomes something like you're there and you say, oh my, and your receiver is saying, I really need to get to the Giant, but my car is broken down. I could say, I'll take you there and I'll bring you home. It's not gonna be that much longer for me. I think it's an individual decision to do that. But when you start feeling servitude and not service
Right.
to the person,
Right.
it's time to,
Yeah.
it's time to speak up. Or
Yeah.
like I said, the last time we met, you can lay out what you can do for a person. And I have done that before in emails, to say, I'm here to give you spiritual support, to spend time with you, to talk with you. And if this is appealing to you, then that's great, let's move forward.
Right.
Well, I think it's
I
also
think-
important that you have to be clear in your conversation with
Right.
the person.
Right.
You're listening to them at the end of the conversation, when you're getting ready to say goodbye. It's almost a recap of, a lot of ways, the next step.
Yeah.
Also, it's going back and putting your notes in the database.
Right.
And it's creating those plans, because I can see a point where somebody will say, hey, Woody, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I need you at 10 a.m. to noon, and
Right. If something doesn't, if your care receiver asked you something or says something and it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't. So if they are asking, Woody, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, can you take me here? Like, I didn't sign, no, I'm walking through this situation. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to, help you feel God's love. That's not the case. Now, if they're talking about going to Monday Bible study and you drive by their house and you want to take them every Monday, then, that's your,
So Gina, your letter of introduction, that's just something you've come up with on your own? Do you
Sometimes
have a letter of introduction? I mean, how does it, you get a call from someone, you find out that they need a CCM, then do you just throw it out and say, okay, here's so-and-so? I love that whole letter of introduction. So I just wondered, is there something formal that we have?
so it's different every time. So typically we might identify people that we think would benefit from having a CCM. And then, so we would ask them, is this something you would be interested in?
And when you say that to them, what are you saying exactly to them? How do you explain the role?
So what we would say, and I just have an email from Barbara, she just sent out to somebody saying this, but we have congregational care ministers at Floris. They're an extension of the pastoral staff, and they're here to walk through a difficult journey with our congregants and to support them spiritually and to listen to them, to pray with them. Is that something you would be interested in?
Okay, I need to get that.
So,
But I don't really have I just kind of make it up
No, but whatever
every time.
what she sent out to the person, I'd like to see that.
And she just made, that was this particular case, so.
It's case specific, it's not so general.
yeah, and that was what I did. I mean, she gave me a name, and it was a woman who had had surgery and was gonna be kind of in her house for a while. And she just was lonely and was going through things. And so you gave me her email, I sent her an email, and I said, I'd like to introduce myself. I am a congregational care minister from Floris. It was, indicated to me that you would like to have someone to talk with while you're going through this. And these are the things that I can provide for you. If this sounds like something you would like to do, let's get together. And that was just me. And I kind of wanted, because I heard from Carol that this particular congregant could lose control in a situation with me. So I felt upfront I needed to tell her, this is all I can do for you. And she was very interested in it,
When you
so,
say lose control, meaning go
Like-
take,
very needy, like,
Needy, okay.
you know, could snowball into something more, and
But I
so,
think it's just a good way, because when we graduate, you know, we're gonna be presented to the congregation, and I was thinking, what is Tim gonna say? If you're in crisis, one of these people, I mean, so I'm trying to ascertain like all of this, we'll talk later. But I love the whole idea of, because it would come probably from me, I would say, Tim and I would say, oh, so-and-so could benefit, and so I love having this letter of introduction that kind of explains what our role is, and it's just something that you feel, you know, would be beneficial to you. As opposed to just calling them up and saying, hey, I need to come over and meet with you because,
Right,
you know,
right.
you're in crisis.
Well, and
actually, copies of those letters would be great.
Right.
And take the names out of them.
Right, I think
right.
so too.
Protect your
Like a
identity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that would be great.
Well, it'd be
Or
helpful
even-
to us to know what's said
Right.
as a way to introduce us, so.
If you just had something basic and then you tweak it.
Right.
Yeah, right, but just to have a general letter of introduction
Yep.
of what it is that we're all about, and, you know, and kind of, like Gina said, kind of, this is our little box that we stay in, and it's just something that you would, you know, find helpful.
Right.
that was mostly to let this particular care receiver know that I was not gonna be all things to her.
But I
This
think
was
for
just what I-
everybody, that's beneficial, regardless if you have a needy person or not a needy person. I think just saying this is what this role does, is just something that, you know, and so, because right now it's so vague to me, other than,
Stevens Minister had a contract, that we had a contract with our care receiver. And it was all spelled out,
Right.
and the care receiver read it and agreed to those things and signed the bottom of it. Because it was confidential, even the pastors didn't know who the Stevens Minister was assigned to. There was someone who needed a Stevens Minister, but the pastors never knew who that Stevens Minister was going to be. And then, so you had a contract that you met with your receiver, and they signed it, and you signed it, and you kept it in a file. And at the end of it, they signed off and you signed off when the relationship was over. And you kept notes, and you kept notes in a file, it wasn't in Fellowship One. 'cause we
well,
didn't
and
have
two,
that then.
if it's case specific, or not case specific, but if it's incident specific, like a surgery or something, then there is a start and an end.
Yeah.
Where in my mind, I'm thinking, some of these people, this may just go on, and so,
And that's something every situation's different, but getting back to the letter, we can come up, we can
Okay.
forward copies of letters you can use as you see fit, as templates and whatnot, but every case is different. I mean, some CCM relationship, you go to the hospital once and that's it. Other ones, it is a few years, it really is, but it depends if the CCM is, I mean, all these things. If you're a CCM and this is something you want to do for a couple years, you know, and things evolve so they can just keep going and going. But if you're looking at the situation, you're like, I could do this for 6 months. Like we have one who I want to talk to Melissa about, and what we want to say is like, oh, well, you know, this is what a CCM does. They're to listen, to support this particular person wants to have, you know, they just want someone to talk to, adult conversation. I got off the phone with her. She's like, it's so nice to talk to adult. Thank you. And they just want somebody to talk to and say, oh, well, this is something that, you know, we could set up for the next 4 months, the next 6 months, and see how it goes. And that way you're not like committing to forever. It's like, we can try this for 4 months. We could try this for 6 months. And particularly if you think the person might be the type to take advantage of a CCM, you put those boundaries up at the beginning and you know, let them know.
But if it's a grief situation, if it's a loss of a loved one, you might anticipate it could be 2 years. Stevens Ministers would receive a care receiver knowing it could be a 2-year commitment for them.
All right.
And I mean, I have had a care receiver that probably was 12 months, maybe more. But then it was kind of like, the best way I can say it, is they wean from you.
Yeah.
You notice that there's less and less need every time you spend time with them, and it comes to a natural end.
And that's ideal to have that, because I just think of Terry with Gail. This just became a relationship, and they both enjoyed it. I think Terry 3 years was a long time. Was a very it was a relationship that required a lot of giving on her part. And I don't think there was any intention for the recipient to not have this. The recipient's
There's
like,
no end point.
I love this because it's all give, so why would I want to end it? So you do, I mean, that's something Terry felt strongly about this relationship, which is fine, but that's not where, to me, the ideal thing is that you help the person through this situation. You're there to walk through a situation with them.
Not life in general.
Right. You can't
Either.
fix their situation. They can or they can't, and have to come to peace with that. So you're not there to make the situation go away. If they want to take the next steps to solve it, or if they want to take the next steps to be at peace about that, that's wonderful. And you want to hopefully, walk with them as they do that, but not.
But not carry them.
Yes. So getting back to our, and this is great, we can just discuss all day, but just hospital visits, we're talking about hospital visits. How do we know as a church when someone's going to the hospital? So people will write on the prayer cards during service, there's yellow prayer cards, and they might say, it's so funny, we'll have people, oh, I'm having like major surgery tomorrow. And you're like, pray for me. But all they want is someone to pray for them. They don't want someone to visit them. But they might say, I'm having surgery next week. So we would follow up. Oh, would you like someone to come pray with you in the hospital? It could be an individual calls the office or sees the pastor after church or sees the staff and says, hey, I just want you all to know I'm going to be in the hospital. Or it could be through a congregate, did you hear that so-and-so is in the hospital? Or we've had neighbors, who was in the hospital, and their neighbor called to tell us. But even with Carlene, her neighbor did call, but we knew from found that out some other way. So.
Might have been the Szynski's.
No, it wasn't the Szynski's. How did we know? I don't know. But then her neighbor, Jen.
But it needs to be vetted through the pastors, whether this person should receive, because they have to, there should be some vetting, so you don't just get somebody who doesn't really want you to, right?
Yeah. I mean, it could be the pastors, a lot, it depends. Like Tom and Barbara, they're of the type, we're going to the hospital. And they'll just show up. They're not to call ahead. They don't call ahead of time. They're there. And so I would say if the church staff feels like, oh, this person should have a visitor, then we might say, oh, Linda, can you go visit the person? We haven't talked to them, but, we would like you to go visit. And so they might not be aware you're coming, but that's not always a bad thing.
Oh, I guess I was just thinking being assigned somebody to vet it through the pastors first, but not hospital visits or.
Yeah, but, and again, people pick up their own people too,
Right.
So. Hospital. Oh, and again, this is out from chapter 6 in the book, Hospital Visitation Protocol. And I thought of you. This was interesting when I was in at Church of the Resurrection. Their CCM is park and pastoral parking. And they're like, you have their name tag, which I've put in a request for everyone's name tag, and you would think it would be a pretty quick thing. It's just taking a little while. And it has to do with the restoration artwork. It's created such turmoil.
Such turmoil.
Such turmoil. So, but they say if you have that congregational care minister name tag, a lot of times.
Oh, because the word minister.
Minister.
Oh, I was looking for that. Because when I saw that, I'm cracking up. I'm like, oh my
Yep.
gosh. I could see some pastor, me driving up, taking some real pastor's spot, and I'm going, excuse me?
Well, and that's like, you can, in the paid parking, a lot of times if you park in paid parking, it's like, oh, I'm a congregational care minister. And they're like, oh, okay. So that's what they were doing at Church of the Resurrection. I'm like, oh, you can always try it and see if it works. And then you brought up a good point about dressing appropriately. And frequently when I visit people, I say, like, I've worked out and I am in my workout clothes, but you assess the situation. It's that you don't want the low cut. You're like, how are you today?
Mostly, or if,
The shorty shorts or.
And a lot of perfume.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Be clean and,
Yeah.
be prepared when you go,
Right.
unless it's like an emergency and they need someone, because the family needs
Right.
someone.
Yeah.
But I think you're okay, like me. I assume I'm okay going in my workout clothes because I'm like, well, that's all right. So, but.
Yeah.
I have to dress warmly because there's hospitals
Well,
that are so
yeah.
cold.
Yeah. But that's a good point about the.
If you're gonna pray with them before the surgery and you go back there.
But it is always good to wear a name tag.
Yeah.
I mean, it helps the staff, and it does make you look a little more
Official.
Yeah.
And also, if the person you're visiting doesn't know you, a lot of times when you meet someone, you're like, hi, I'm Linda, and then they're not thinking about what your name is, and then they can see that it's your name. And one of the things they talked about in training is having a hospital kit or a hospital ready kit, and what are some of the different things that you might want in your hospital ready kit. And it's certainly up to you. And Jean,
Was that, I can't remember, I read some stuff a while ago, is that where we would have the anointing oil?
oh yeah.
Yeah, because we are anointing restoration, I already talked to him about it. Yes, we're gonna anoint.
Okay. Well, that answers one of my questions. So we should still have the non-judgmental. I'll just put that over here.
Israel, when he goes in the
Oh, that's great.
And I have some over there too. I brought some. All right. So what might you want in your hospital ready kit?
Some Tim's anointing oil that Linda's.
All right.
And you need a Bible.
Yes.
if you have like that little prayer book, I think is real helpful. Now, you could also give communion, because, you know, in our church, you don't have to be anybody special, you can just be. Well, you know how some religions are.
Communion supplies.
I mean, sometimes there are travel communion kits.
Yeah,
that
wait.
Pastors take, but it has to be blessed.
Blessed.
Right, and if you know ahead of time, then the pastors can do that. And up in this behind the sanctuary, we do have the travel communion kits. They come in a nice little thing.
Good.
So anointing oil, Bible, prayer book, communion supplies.
Well, I see you've got the cards over here. Those are really good, especially if you're coming into a situation that you're not familiar with. There are things like grief, suicide. There's lots of different.
Oh, like
things.
little leave behinds?
Well, no, for you.
For
Right.
us, we're doing
Look
that.
at
Oh.
Yeah.
And with prayers and references.
Okay, so
and
that's
the
got
Bible,
reference,
yeah.
that's what I was gonna say, it'd be good to have some reference prayers to be ready for the situation.
You can always take an upper room with you.
Right.
And you had the yellow one. I gave that to Carlene.
Oh, great,
Um,
great.
But, you know, upper rooms are good to just take a stack of them, throw a few quarters or whatever in there.
I just gave somebody upper room the other day. It was in my purse. I'm like, here, you need this.
Right.
Have your card with you and.
Yeah, so some of the things, and we need to talk about, we do have the CCM business cards, which has that email address, which is in functioning, but no one can access it. So I have to think about that if we want to use those. So two of the options, and tell me what you think. So we could go with the CCM card, and then you can just put you can add whatever information that you want there. Or we have, these are just Floris cards. So I have to figure out if I if somebody as a CCM wants to check that email, or I guess,
I think the Floris card probably would be best, because then you'd have room at the bottom. to
At the
put your
bottom.
name.
Yes.
And then if you feel like you can put your own email, if you
Yeah.
want them,
Right.
or a cell number if you want them to call you.
Yeah.
Because if this is not an activated, I mean, these are what I have. I have a stack of these that I carry with me all the time.
the CCM card.
But you still have
Yeah.
to write your name on it, and you still have to
Right.
write
Right.
your email, so.
And I can get that. I should check into that. I'm just in my, so many hours. I'm not a full-time employee, so I'm
We
like, oh,
have-
I already have.
There are restoration cards that look like this already.
But it's good, because especially if you're visiting someone who is not well, and you don't have an opportunity to pray with them, or, they're busy with the staff or whatever in the hospital, if you're going for a hospital visit, you can always just leave this on their bedside table. I went in to visit a girl who ultimately died, and the family was not in a place for me to come in to pray with her, and she had just fallen asleep. And so I just wrote my name on a card and put it on the table, just that they knew the church had been there.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's good to have this, even just this representing you or the church.
I like the card, the CCM card.
The CCM.
It tells you who you are, what you are.
Yeah.
Unless
Well,
you write CCM on this.
Well, except that if you're doing it as a leave behind, if you're speaking to the person, they're gonna know. If you're just leaving it behind, they're not gonna know what a congregational care minister is anyway.
so you have choices.
But this is not about you, this is about the church.
Right.
The church
Right.
has been
Right.
to see you.
See, and that's why
And you
I
can
like,
put your contact information
Right,
on there, and
right.
they would have a point of contact when they call the number on the back.
Right.
Say, looks like Gina Hume came to see
right,
me.
right.
How do I reach her?
Right.
Or, at least I'd like to come to this service.
Because we had to do that with somebody who was in a coma, and their adult child wasn't there when, somebody came by from the church, and so they left the card so that they knew that someone had visited, and then they reached back out.
Do we have table tents or just the flat cards?
So we just have the flat cards. What would most be table tenty is this, which has a picture of the church on the front, and then it has the name and the address and the phone number.
Those new? Because I have the one with the old red thing on the back. It has the ones I send out have the red Floris.
And then what would you do with that?
Oh, these
Is
are
that
new,
just a little
Carol.
card that you would send? What do you mean when you say table tent?
These, just,
It just stands up instead of laying flat. It's a little one like
Right.
this. It would be a tent about this big.
Oh.
it
That
just,
would be nice, people would see that, it wouldn't get caught under a tray.
right.
These are actually new because the old one had the serve, worship, whatever. It
Oh,
was
yeah,
the red
the
one.
green
that
thing.
was on that one.
Oh,
That's
so
the one
those
I
have been here since I've been here, so I don't know how.
I could use some updated ones because I'm sending out the old Florisy ones when I send my
Well,
cards.
well, here you are.
Sometimes when people, do we have any more of those?
Yeah, upstairs.
Okay, Prime Minister, sorry.
Yep.
Come to your office.
Yep. So those are just, when we talked about
It's nice, it's got.
tent cards or business cards, those are examples of those there. Communion supplies, we have the portable one here at church, and one of the pastors, that's the only thing they need to bless the bread ahead of time.
Right.
So they would need to know ahead of time. Prayer book, that yellow prayer book's good, but we also talked about the different devotionals. So when you go to devotionals, what's the ones upstairs? I can't think of.
Upper room.
Upper rooms are.
That's the small upper room, the yellow one that you have there.
Oh yeah, that's the little prayer book. This is a devotional. Gosh, when did we do this? A couple years ago. But this is something that may be of use as well. And it's
Oh, is this the Lenten study thingy?
our congregants did this. Yes, I
See,
believe.
This is the old logo, which is.
Oh yeah. Oh okay. Yeah.
This is old.
So there's just, so they may find comfort in that, or you may get ideas out of that.
It's Sophia's picture on the front with Miss Patrice.
Bible. So CCM cards, for lack of a better word, and Gina talked about these. These come from the CCM training out of Church of the Resurrection. And they're great cards if you don't have a set. Do you set? Because they go over different situations and they tell
Can I
you.
have two for, who do you,
And the back
who do you-
talks about anointing Linda.
Oh, it's
About anointing people. She's all excited about it.
Practice on me later.
Yeah. So they are, I have my set here, but it's an old fancy bag. But if you're going into a situation and you have a basic understanding of what it may be, when death is imminent, and that you might run into that, it gives you some key scriptures to use, which are not, and what you would want to do is look at this ahead of time, not when you got there and like, oh, you're dying, so let me pull out my cards. But you want to look ahead of time, and then also facing death. And they actually have a prayer here as well. And this may give you, if you could certainly read that prayer, or it can give you ideas for a prayer that you're going to come up with. And again, it lists some scripture there. And then on the back, it has reading, like some different books. So the books might be useful for family members. We do, I had mentioned before, we do have some books that are good to bring for people that are dealing with cancer. And we also have some books that I give out when someone's lost a loved one. So I brought those down before, I didn't bring them tonight, but if you're in a situation where someone's grieving, we do have some books for that, and also with the cancer. So
And those, the ones that I've had before, for the loss of a loved one, you send out, is it almost like quarterly?
There's those.
This is a different set?
We have those, and then there's one book.
Oh, okay.
So there's, So, and that's, if you are a CCM and someone's lost a loved one, there's a set of 4 booklets that go out. One's, right after the person passed, then it's about quarterly. It's over a year that we send those out. But does anyone have any other things that might be useful? Oh, one thing is a prayer blanket or shawl.
Okay.
Shawl. Oops, that's a W and an A. Well,
Do you have them on hand so we could, like, if we should be having a go bag in our car or whatever?
Honey, she got blankies, she got shawls, she got everything.
I do. I'm stuck. So I have them upstairs near my office. So if you want to stop in at some time, if I'm not there, in my cube, there's about this level, you lift it up, and there's prayer blankets in there, and there's also, be careful, there's baby blankets as well. So you want to, there's some suited for men, some suited for women, and some for the babies. There are some also, I have overflow behind Tiara's desk, and Tiara's Barbara's admin. So,
You have quilted and crocheted, right?
there's typically the prayer shawls and blankets tend to be more knitted or crocheted, and then for the babies, a lot of times it's the quilts. But I do have some adult quilts as well. But these ladies do incredible work. They're just amazing.
And Carol took one to the lady we were seeing in the hospital, and she had it wrapped around her the entire time. All 3 days I went, every day she had it on her. And if she didn't have it on her, it was draped on the bed, and people would come in and admire it. And I mean, she
Oh, good. Yeah.
and wants to send a note to.
When I've given them out, they've been extremely well received, and in fact, the person got at the hospital a couple years ago, and when she went in the nursing home, I was like, "Oh, your blanket came." She goes, "Of course it did."
So they do this. These are the shawls, and then sometimes they make the blankets, which are you would put on your lap. So, but if anyone needs, I would give that to a woman. But if anybody has a need for this, they're welcome. They're welcome to it. So, and I know sometimes, I just noticed this one has a bit of sometimes they need to air out. I'm gonna have to air that one out. That to keep in mind. But those are some things that you may want to have on hand with you. Okay. Oh, and other things to keep in mind. Don't visit if you're sick. Now, that should, just go with common sense. But sometimes if it's the person you've had a relationship with and you've been, being their CCM for 2 months and then they end up in the hospital, you're like, I have to go. Well, no, you don't have to go. And also if they're there and they say, oh, I just need help getting to the bathroom, well, that's what the little nurse's button's for. And this meeting them at eye level, so not, looking down. So you, next to the bed, pull up a chair. And one of the things, I think that's on the next one, you don't sit on the bed. Don't sit on the bed. All right, so that's our hospital visitation protocol. Planned pre-surgery visits. So if you know someone's having surgery and you're going to pray with them prior to surgery, you want to arrive at their room at least 30 minutes prior to surgery, which doesn't mean the hospital 30 minutes prior, because it can take you a half an hour by the time you get to the hospital and get to their room. So just allow enough time, because the last thing you want, they've got a lot going on. You don't be like, I'm here to pray, and they're being wheeled down the hall. So keep that in mind. And that would be planned ahead of time. So you might get a call from me saying so-and-so's having surgery at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Would you be available to pray with them? So that would be, they would know you were coming and all that stuff.
Another option, if you know them, you can always go to their home the night before too. If it's just an outpatient and you don't want to rush to try to make sure you meet that 30 minutes, you can, if you know them or you feel comfortable, you can say, I'd like to come the night before your surgery and pray with you and your family, if you'd like that.
And I know some of the times the pastors pray over the phone with the people as well. And it just, a lot of surgeries, they have to be there at 6 a.m. It's just not convenient to be there that early.
And I know that Tim does not go to the hospital for outpatient surgery. So he will pray with you the night before or over the phone, but he's not gonna go and sit and be there on the day of surgery if it's outpatient.
Right. Yeah, outpatient, yeah.
He would be there every day, all day.
Right. Now with unplanned visits, and that may be, we found out someone's in the hospital. Linda, can you go assess the situation? Can you go pray with them? Can you check them out, see how they're doing? So when you get there, you may want to check first with the nurse's station to see, they may be like, oh, you need to wear a gown, or they may say, oh, they're down having an MRI. They're not going to be back for 2 hours, and in that case, a lot of times then you would leave the card or
they've been moved to another room.
Right. So if they're there, you want to knock, if the door is closed or if it's open, instead of barging right in, obviously, just kind of pick your head in, explain who you are, assessing the situation. If their family is all there, respecting their privacy. We've obviously talked a lot, which is good. And here's where I say don't sit on the bed and don't relay similar health stories. Now, we talked about that earlier, it might be appropriate to say your mom passed or whatever, but, it's like, oh, my next door neighbor had the same type of cancer and this is what she went through. But don't worry, she's fine. They don't want to hear that, So it's hard to, you think you're helping, but that's not. We're going to skip our role play because we're running out of time. We talked about our experience, which is good. Home visits. And you can run into anything at home. It could be that someone's physically compromised, and when I say they have mental concerns, I don't want to say, it could be stress or anxiety, or just a difficult life situation. So you run into all sorts of things at home. And our goal is, when we talked about this through the night, comfort them in their current situation. Again, you're not there to solve their problem, to fix their problem, to clean their house and make everything right and be their be-all and end-all, but you are there to bring them comfort, to listen. And it could be, to bring peace to the situation. I mean, they could be, if they're frantic, you don't want to get sucked into that franticness. You want to be the peace, the calming force. And we'll just talk a little bit about people that have dementia. We have a lot of congregants that are experiencing dementia right now. And as our church ages, I think that's going to be a very common thing. It may sound weird, but like I like to visit people with dementia. I've had a lot of us have had personal experience with it, but I sort of have a heart for them. And there was, I just have, a handout on, this is how to make the most of your one-on-one visit with with the elderly. I don't know, a lot of you may know this, but put yourself in their shoes. So particularly if they're mentally compromised, since dementia is so common, you're not going to have don't expect to have a logical, necessarily, conversation like you would with your peer. And you might pick up some clues from some pictures or some of their belongings, like, here's a vacation they were at the Grand Canyon or something, and they might not remember it, but they might. So if you're looking for things to talk about, a lot of times people early morning is best. When they're elderly, that's at their best time. If you know when nap time is, you don't want to visit then. And there's something called sundowning, where as the sun goes down, they start to get less cognizant.
I just hit all the checklists. Who wants to come visit me?
So eye contact, again, like someone in the hospital, is very important. You're focused on them. They may not be focused on you, but you're focused on them. I've found sometimes pictures of like my dog, pictures of vacation kids. That is, if you have an iPad and you bring those up, people, they're bright. They looking at those. They suggest, it could be a flower or something, a headline from the newspaper or a magazine. National Geographic sometimes are good. And also if they have the TV on, which a lot of times they do, you might need to turn the TV down. Body language, they're going to be looking at your body language. It's so funny because people, you don't want to discount somebody who has dementia because you think like, they're not going to remember it always here, but they pick up on stuff. Like they can tell your attitude. If you're loving and caring, they know that. If you're happy, they'll feel that warmth. They know. It's sort of like almost like how a dog has a sixth sense. They do that. I used to always bring my dog when I would visit like the elderly people would love the dogs, and dogs are conditionally loving, and people just brighten up when they would see the dog. It's funny, one of the nurse's aides was afraid of dogs though, so, but, it's all right. And then you just have to watch out if you bring your dog, if they eat the pills off the ground.
One thing other than with dementia, but with a regular care receiver, remember the things they tell you. So that when you go back to visit, you can say, how is your daughter Linda doing? You mentioned her. And so sometimes when you leave with them, make a note to yourself, keep a notebook that's confidential, or you can make it into your CCM note.
Right.
But remember things like when I told Carol I would take this woman again because I didn't want her to have to tell her story again. I know her story, so I don't have to ask her, who is your daughter, who is your grandson?
Right.
So it's important to remember, and so don't be distracted and remember. It's not going to make a difference with a dementia patient. Like Nadine went to visit my mother and brought her communion and spent all this lovely time with her, and my mom is gazing up at him. And then the next day I said, Mom, did you like that visit with Nadine? She said, who?
Yeah.
But like you say, in that moment, they feel the love and they feel the attention, but don't expect that memory card to be there the next time you come, because they don't happen.
Right. And also a change of scenery, just walking outside, looking at the flowers. Home visit. So where? So you want to be. This is down at the bottom. But your page is a little different. Dementia or frail people. You want to be soothing. I mean, even the person doesn't have dementia, they could be frail. You don't want to be, barging in the house like, hey, you have to assess and be calm, because they could surprise very easily, startle very easily. You don't want to come up from behind them. You want to approach them in the front.
That's really good.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a hurry, like, hey, let's, come on, we're going out to look at the garden. Let's get going. So we're like, hey, it's a nice day. Maybe we'll take a stroll outside. And particularly people with dementia, go with the flow, don't correct. If they're like, there was a forklift in my room last night. I'm like, oh, great. Okay, good. I like forklifts. I like them, yeah. And then you just kind of, and people with dementia typically are very easy to distract. You say, oh, did I show you a picture of my dog? And when they're saying, there's a forklift in my room, and you're like, hey, did I show you a picture of my dog? Like, that's okay. And it's about, you're just making their current moment good. And that's what it's about. It's really about making their current moment good.
That's a good way to put it.
Because they live in the moment. And if you're stepping through a difficult life situation, we talked about this, minding your boundaries, which Melissa, you brought up with that person. I can do this with you, but I can't do that with you. Again, we're there listening, not problem solving. And one of the things is so funny, they said this in the book, and I was looking at some other stuff, and they said it also, don't argue. I'm like, really? They had to put that in the book? But I guess I don't feel like I should have to say that, but you're clearly not going to be arguing with your care receiver. And again, we'll skip the role play. So optional, anointing and communion, and we did bring it up there. So we can certainly get you these little vials of anointing oil. And if you like, we can do, the thought is that we'll meet monthly and talk about our care receivers and how we can help each other out. But we can do a communion and anointing practice if you want at one of our meetings. I don't know if that's something of interest.
Yeah.
Now, when I talked to Barbara about anointing and communion, she's like, people love communion. They're extremely uncomfortable with anointing because it's a touch. You're touching their forehead. And so she said Methodist are, they like their space.
We're a very waspy group.
Yeah. So she's like, communion, they're all about the communion. She's like, anointing. And it could be a generational thing too. Some people feel, there's two sacraments. There's baptism and anointing. Baptism's when you come in, and anointing's when you go out. So some people, you have to be, do you think I'm going to die? If you're doing this to someone in the hospital, it could be unsettling. So you have to, but some people.
In that book, I kind of explained it because I never really understood, and it was bringing the Holy Spirit in, right? I read this on a plane years ago. But that's what you were.
Yes.
Holy Spirit. And so if you explain.
Well, God is always present, and then we are praying, and it doesn't mean we're praying for healing or comfort. It doesn't mean that's. You don't want people also to think like, oh, I'm going to be healed, right?
Right.
So
yeah, that's exactly, and so whatever they had in the book, I thought, okay, yeah, you got to make sure you kind of explain.
It's a sign of God's love, in the sense God is with you.
Skin, that'll help you too.
Yeah, the workbook here is.
God is with you. God loves you. This is a sign that God is with you.
You're Carrie. Give me a facial.
And sometimes, they feel God's present, and particularly if you have the scented oil, and then that stays with them, and it's a reminder of God's presence with them. But you do want to make sure, some people may say, yes, that would be wonderful, but then other people may like, that one, they don't want to be touched, or would they think, she thinks I'm going to die?
Yeah.
So communion. So we could do that at one of our future meetings, do an anointing and communion practice, so that you're comfortable doing it with other people or doing it for other people. So, but that, a lot of what Kelly talked about last week when we met, you know, all that applies to one-on-one visits. So these are just some nuances for the one-on-one visits, some of the things we have. And so it's 8:35, so I'm gonna stick with our time, but does anyone have anything they'd like to add? Thank you for all your input. Like I said, you all are well-versed on
I
this.
think one thing we didn't say is we always introduce ourselves when we come in to the room.
Yes,
Don't just rely on your name tag.
right,
Just say,
right.
I'm so-and-so from Floris Church.
Right, and yes, you want to say you're from Floris, and it particularly in the hospital, because you would probably schedule if it was in their home. Is it okay if I visit? Is it okay if I come in now? Is it okay? So you're always out. Is it okay if I pray with you? Is it okay that I'm here? And you obviously want to read their body language. If you know they're like, oh, okay, then you're like, well, I can just. You know, the pastors are concerned about you and just wanted to check on you if you don't think they want you to be around. And then if it's okay for that, they pray, and then they want you to leave, then they want you to leave. But
I've seen Sam since 2012 and never anointed anybody. So it's not something that's gonna pop up.
yeah, I think the communion is would be more likely to happen.
Every person lives sees.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.